What's up, Cough Country? Welcome back to the news. This is Steve with your Cannabis News. I'm excited you're back. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's been going on. And what do? We cover that. So we're going to get into that right now. I'm excited you're back. So what we got going on today, we're starting off with what is in your cannabis? And we're asking the question, is that mold in your cannabis? We're going to take a look at mold, the dangers of it, and how to spot it. So that's going to be exciting. Then we are taking a look. We got FAA, a Federal Aviation Administration, messing with state legal cannabis, taking licenses away. Should they? Shouldn't they? We'll explore it all. That's coming right now. Then we go down to Florida, where rescheduling has rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And the Florida Republican Party is no different. They're making a whole big fuss. I'll tell you what's going on down there. MedMen, one of the biggest cannabis companies on the market, kind of the hallmark of the cannabis industry, is closing their doors. We're talking about how they're going bankrupt today. Then we're moving on to the strains of yesterday. We're coming back to one of the legends of the Middle East, Lebanese Hash, particularly Lebanese Red. I know you've heard stories about it. Well, I want to hear them, and we're going to talk about Lebanese Red and the legend it is. And we're going to round out with talking about the rescheduling event, the biggest thing everybody's been talking about, biggest reform in 50 years. We're going to cover it. And we also went to Atlantic City to the Champs Conference to see what they thought about it, and lots of different opinions. And we're going to get all into the news right now. Get all messy with it. Yeah, let's get into the news, guys.
No sticks, no seeds, just news.
Now, one of the benefits of health or anything. Now, these days, the health standards are much higher, thanks to laboratory testing and health oversight. But you can't always trust that the people supposed to be doing diligence actually are doing that diligence, right? For example, in the UK, they just had a spat of reports where people were finding mold contaminating their medical marijuana. Even that's government-regulated medical marijuana. People were coming forward saying something's wrong with this. They were being shushed, pushed to the side, and they wind up in the hospital with respiratory infections and chronic illnesses. So I think it's valuable for you to have the knowledge yourself of how to take care of your cannabis and how to spot mold in your marijuana. So now, don't get me wrong, guys. Mold is everywhere. Mold spores are going to be all over the place. It's actually one of the main components of normal, everyday household dust. So that's why mold can develop in any place that the conditions are actually right. So what is mold like? Mold like somewhere humid, like somewhere warm, dark, not a lot of air circulation, and that's really about it. So it's going to grow all over the place. So mold spores themselves, not really the issue here. It's not until mold kind of gathers together in large enough numbers where you can actually see it that it's going to start causing issues. Now, cannabis starts to get moldy in the drying process, right? When the curing or drying area isn't well ventilated, it's too humid, but can also grow during the growing process as well. Mold spores can survive the heat of a lighter, that flame. They can survive the oven during the decarboxylation process. So it's a tough little guy. And it causes all sorts of issues, especially with prolonged exposure, right? Things like headache, fatigue, dizziness, all the way up to respiratory infection, allergic reactions, even brain infections. So it's something you're going to want to watch out for, as it can cause all sorts of chronic illnesses. So how do you spot it? Look at these pictures here. You're going to see these. So first of all, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to smell that bud. It's going to have, if it has mold on there, you're going to get this musty, mildewy scent. That's going to be your first note. Then you're going to actually look at the bud. Hopefully you're looking at a little frosty nugget in your hand. And those little white hairs you're seeing on this plant right here, those are good things. Those are the trichomes. They're glandular secretions that have all the good cannabinoids, the THC, the CBD. That's what you want. What you want to avoid, take a look at these pictures. You see all the little fuzzy white spots. It's going to have a powdery note to it, some fuzzy note. Sometimes there's going to be some kind of discoloration. It'll look a little bit different from the plant, maybe white, maybe it'll look gray, maybe a little bit black. But that's going to be the main difference between trichomes and mold. That fuzzy, that powdery note, that's going to look different than anything else on the plant. Now, once you see this thing popping up, throw the nug out. There's really nothing you can do at this point to get it out of there. To prevent that from happening to the rest of your stash, you're going to want to keep it in an airtight container, somewhere dark, somewhere dry. And just those simple things is going to keep you on the good side of your bud and keep most of those nasty critters and fungi out of your plant. Definitely going to be what you want to do. So elsewhere, guys, the FAA, the Federal Aviation administration just took a license away from a pilot in Alaska that was transporting state legal cannabis. So state law says, what does it say? You're allowed to transport legal cannabis within the confines of the state, as long as you have the right paperwork, all the documentation and all that. It's not until you cross the border into another state that it becomes a federal issue and you start getting into traffic, illegality, all this kind of weird stuff. And this guy, this pilot, was completely above board. I want to mention that. He runs a state legal growing operation under Flying High Investments, and he was simply transporting his cannabis to where it needed to go. But remember, guys, this is Alaska. A lot of these places you can only get to when you're flying. So James Fayez Jr., the pilot, he came forward saying he wants to appeal the decision, saying, I have done nothing wrong. And the court is saying that's not the case, but there's no charges leveled against this guy. I think that's an important thing to note. The state is totally fine with him transporting his cannabis wherever he needs to in Alaska. They have no issues, no charges have been brought against him. But the FAA is a federal administration, and they say if the federal government wanted to come after Fayez, they could have, so they had to act. That was their justification. And it's funny enough, they only caught him because the state came in and looked at Fayez's manifest, and Fayez said he was using his airplane as a personal transportation vehicle. He was transporting marijuana in his own personal vehicle. They said, no, you can't call it your own vehicle. Even though the plane was his own vehicle, you gotta call it a private aircraft. And it was only then that the Federal Aviation Administration started freaking out, and they said, we gotta take that license away, because federally, it is illegal to transport marijuana by air. I don't know, kind of like it's illegal to transport it any other way, but I get ahead of myself. So when they went to the courts, Fayez is saying this isn't right, FFA is saying this, and the courts actually upheld the Federal Aviation Administration. They said that an airplane is technically a form of interstate travel, and Alaskan airspace is technically a channel for interstate commerce. So flying falls under federal regulations, right? Fayez came back and he was arguing, hey, no, cannabis was decriminalized in 2014, guys. There's no other way to get this cannabis to where I need to get it to, and I was never charged with a crime. So the FAA coming in is them stepping out of bounds. But the court, again, said no. They upheld the decision of the FAA. And this, according to Fayez and according to me, this looks like an example of a federal administration stepping in on states' rights and messing with state legal cannabis. We had another story this recently. Take a look at this. It happened in New Mexico. Border police were seizing legal cannabis. So it looks like it might be a trend coming up. Check out that story for more on it. If you find more examples of this happening in your environment, let me know about it. I want to hear if this is a trend happening or not. Guys, don't go anywhere. We are going to be right back after a word from our sponsor. It's going to be super quick, and we got more news for you right after that. Don't go anywhere.
This is cannabis. And this is cannabis. And this is cannabis. And this is cannabis. When you put them all together, you've got medicine.
All right, guys, welcome back. Look, that wasn't so bad, was it? We're back into the news already. Don't know what hit you. So now we're taking a look at Florida, guys. Rescheduling has brought opponents of cannabis out of the woodworks. They're all over the place. And particularly in Florida, the entirety of the Florida Republican Party has officially come out and said marijuana is bad, okay? So Florida Republicans have officially said that they are anti-cannabis. It's part of the Florida Republican Party stance at this point. So even if you go down to the county level Republicans cannot be pro-cannabis because it is the Republican stance to be against cannabis. So basically, they are kind of clearing the way for DeSantis to start getting a campaign together and raising funds to take the question of marijuana legalization off of the ballot in November. So back in, like a couple of weeks ago, smart and safe Florida actually got enough signatures together to put the question of marijuana legalization on the ballot so Floridians can decide for themselves if they want cannabis. But Florida Republicans are coming forward saying these phantom, powerful marijuana interests are trashing the state, destroying family values, and just ripping state tourism up by the roots. And that this whole initiative thing is out of touch with what Floridians actually want. Which is a pretty ironic thing because a ballot is, in fact, the direct way for voters to tell their representatives what it is they want. So it sounds kind of like the Republicans are mansplaining to their voters. Don't you worry about it. Daddy will tell you what you want. Okay? But yeah, so the ballot is a direct way for them to say that. So even though they're trying to tear it down, it's pretty revealing how the political agenda is really being represented here. So it's the Florida Republicans kind of coming forward and saying they're really representing their own interests, not the interests of their people. And as their people are coming forward trying to tell them what they actually want, they're saying no, they're not going to do it. If you want more information on what's actually in the Florida ballot and kind of what's going on with that, check out the story we did earlier. That's that thumbnail. Take a look for that if you want to dive deeper into the story. Lots of stuff going on right there. Then we're coming over to MedMen. The cannabis industry is being rocked by MedMen, one of the biggest businesses in cannabis that we knew of, is actually closing their doors recently. Now, at one point, MedMen was the darling of the cannabis industry, right? It was the biggest and baddest one on the market. In 2016, when California went legal, they came on the scene all looking super tech savvy and all technologically forward. They were really going for this. They were labeling themselves the Apple Store of weed. Take a look at these photos. They were really doing it. They had the displays open. They had the helpers with lanyards. This was an absolute Apple Store kind of vibe to it. At this point, when they first opened, they had a $3 billion valuation. So that's this kind of unicorn company. It's coming onto the market, this hot pot startup that's pretty much a guaranteed win. You put money in, you're going to get your investment back. So they were calling it this unicorn company. They were totally pursuing this Apple Store vibe. Even some of the owners, the co-founders, they were labeling themselves as the Steve Jobs of the green rush. So with all this hype behind them, they jumped into the market, expanded rapidly, took on a lot of debt to do it, and legalization didn't really go the way they planned, did it? They invested pretty heavily in the New York market. We all know that was bungled to high heaven, so lots of delays there. And pretty much the entirety of their existence, they labored under high tax rates, and they were cut off from banking services. So it's kind of ironic, a little unfortunate they're closing their doors right as this rescheduling event has happened, promising to kind of alleviate some of those concerns. But by 2020, their stock price was down 92%. Pretty much all the value of their company had been wiped out. And when co-founders Adam Bierman and Andrew Modlin, these guys right up here, these two Apple Store dudes, found themselves just up to their neck in lawsuits, they started jumping ship as well. And this last year or two, the company's just been swirling down the drain. Before they finally thrown in the towel, they found themselves like $400 million in debt with pretty much, as they're saying, no way to pay it back. They are not making the money. So they've spent the last year just liquidating, selling off all assets they can. All the executives have been jumping ship left and right. So this kind of this downfall, this Humpty Dumpty story is kind of coming at a pretty unique time as cannabis is being rescheduled and the business is opening up. So as cannabis is officially bigger than it's ever been, it's still a really, really tough industry for businesses to make it in. There's all these opponents coming forward saying that these cannabis giants especially in Florida, are attacking marijuana interests. And that's really not the case. Marijuana is having a tough time struggling no matter where you go all over the place. So let this be kind of a warning to the industry. Even if you think they're doing well, they're really not. You need to go out there and support your local cannabis business. Because even if giants like this can fail, so can those mom and pop shops too. We need to support them. All right, guys, don't go anywhere. We're going to have one more word from our sponsor, and then we're going to get into Lebanese Red, straight to yesterday. I'm excited about it. You don't want to miss that, do you? Stick around, guys.
I'm Rob Cantrell, and you're watching Cough Country TV. Right here, right now. This is it. You're watching it. Cough Country. You're in this country, cough it up. Cough it up for Cough Country TV. right here, right now, on the internet and beyond. Media, television, pizza, weed, legalized.
Hey guys, welcome back. You ready for some more news? We got some cool stuff for you. We are diving back into the strains of yesterday, exploring where our weed came from and the legends that got us there. And today, we're going to the Middle East, and we're taking a look at the famous, the legendary Lebanese hash. Yeah. Now, in some places in the world, hash is and always was king of the mountain. And hash is pretty much the OG concentrate. It's the original one. And it's been made for centuries by separating those glandular trichomes of the cannabis plant from the rest of the material. They take that, they mush it together into a ball or a brick or something like that that can then be eaten, smoked, or traded. Lovely thing there. And the king of hash, at least for a long time, always was Lebanon. It's a small country in the Middle East that's played a pivotal role in the area all the way back to the time of the Phoenicians. So pretty much all of civilization, Lebanon has been a hot spot. And the best hash in Lebanon comes from the Bekaa Valley. It's nestled between two mountains right next to the Syrian border. And some people say this is one of the best environments in the world to grow marijuana. There's fertile soil, there's lots of sun. It's Lebanon's premier agricultural district, and believe it or not, they do a lot of, it features a lot of Lebanese wine. It's a big wine producing region, which is pretty cool as well. And it's from here that the most famous of hashes, the Lebanese hash, originated. That famous Lebanese red. If you know what I'm talking about, I know you're already getting excited. You're salivating for that Lebanese red. I know it. Now, Lebanese hash always came in two forms, right? And both phenomenal in their own rights. Now, the blonde hash was known as the working man's hash. It was more available, cheaper, it was stronger, more easier to produce. Now, it was harvested a little bit earlier than red Lebanese hash. The plants were harvested a little bit earlier at peak THC production. That's when those trichomes, they're crystal clear or have this milky white note to them. That's when THC production is at its highest. So when they harvest that, put that together, it's a little bit complex than its red friend, but you still get that spicy, woody notes, a little bit of an earthy aroma, but the high is intense, it's bright, you get those sativa effects, strong. It's the working man's hash. It's everything you need. Now the red, the Lebanese red, is a legend all unto itself. Aficionados everywhere remember this as the ultimate Lebanese hash. It's a little more refined than its blonde cousin. They leave it to age in the fields a little bit longer. So those milky white, those clear trichomes start to turn an amber color. Those pistils on the flower, they start to turn this deep red. And that's going to give the Lebanese red its color. And the extra time it spends aging in the sun is going to allow the UV rays to start breaking down that THC to allow other cannabinoids to come forward, giving it more of a complex profile. And it's allowed to age and cure for a season or two after it's been made to kind of let those flavors and those aromas kind of liven up and rich in the plant. CBN particularly is one cannabinoid that's been found in Lebanese red in higher amounts. And CBN has a little bit more of a sedated effect. So Lebanese red gets this indica vibe, this mellowed out kind of high, even when it's produced from a sativa landrace. And people who tasted it back in its heyday have memories of that soft juniper, cedar notes, a little spicy flavor, forward notes to it, an earthy aroma living strong in those memories. That's what people say they remember. But why is hash? Why was most of the old world loyal to hash, not flower? Why do they do it? Now, if you remember, through most of history, there's been no real way to store or transport cannabis to kind of preserve what it is. And it's only been a recent phenomenon that weed is strong as it is. If it's up in the 20% world, it's always lived in these like single-digit percentages. So when you concentrate it into hash, it's a better smoke, it's more concentrated, it's easier to smoke, it's easier to store, and it's easier to trade. So it just made more sense. Now, originally, workers would take the flowers of those plants, rub them together in their hands, and the oils and the trichomes would all break apart. And the resin they would find on their hands, they would roll it together into charas. That's what they called it. And they'd roll that into a ball that would be ready to be smoked and eaten. If you ever heard of temple balls, that's where that's coming from. Now, Lebanese and also Afghani hash at the time became the cream of the crop of the marijuana world when they developed the dry sift technique. And that came about in the 15th century when there was this big marijuana boom across the world. And it was the cleanest and most efficient way to get cannabis, or get the trichomes out of the plant. So they would cut down the plant, let it dry in this central drying area in the middle of town, had little light white walls to reflect the sun back on there, and they would let that dry for about 2 weeks. Then they would break up the plant, work it through a fine silk filter to kind of separate all the trichomes, and it became the most cleanest, efficient way to get hash from the cannabis plant. And it became the calling card of the best Lebanese hash in the world. And the Bekaa Valley, they've been rocking this hash out for forever, for centuries, for a long time. And production didn't really dip until the 1900s when the whole world went through this anti-cannabis craze. It was reefer madness all over the place. And that kind of crackdown lasted until about the 70s. So Lebanon was kind of the cultural and financial hub of the Middle East. They called it the Switzerland of the Middle East. So that kind of economic boom allowed the government to kind of stamp out cannabis a little bit. They could pay people to farm something else, tell them to, or just ignore it completely. But in the mid-70s, they went through a whole revolution that tore that kind of economic security in the country apart. And that's when a lot of people went back to doing what they've always done, farming hash plants. So, and if you've ever tasted Lebanese hash, it probably came from the 70s and 80s when this resurgence of fine Lebanese hash came about. So that is probably when the Lebanese hash, that red Leb, found the legend that they have today. Lebanese hash, I love it. So the other story we got today, guys, of course, we got to touch on it. It's the biggest revolution in 50 years of cannabis. The cannabis is being rescheduled from a Schedule I substance up there next to heroin, above fentanyl, down to a Schedule III substance next to ketamine and steroids. It's the biggest move in 50 years, and we're all excited about it. So one of the hallmarks of Schedule I substance is that it has no medicinal value and a high potential for abuse. The Biden administration sat down with HHS. The FDA said, should this be? They said no, kicked the ball over to the DEA, and apparently with much struggle and much fighting the whole process, they have finally come around and agreed that cannabis should not be a Schedule I substance. Now, it might not be the answer everybody wants, but most people say this is a step in the right direction. We went over to the Champs Conference in Atlantic City, one of the biggest cannabis conventions around, to find out what industry insiders really think about this change. Here's a listen to what they have to say.
I don't really know. I don't want to get too
We're not getting into it. We're not getting into it. That's fair.
But they'll do what they want to do, and we always have to react the way we do.
All right.
I was shocked, but pleasantly surprised. Yeah, I hope it does a lot of big things for the industry. Obviously, it's not a full step towards legalization, but I think it's a half step there, which it's still good news.
I think it's a great step, moving forward. Yeah. But we all know what they should have done. It shouldn't be scheduled at all because it's not a drug.
That's what everybody's saying.
And I mean, I feel like it's definitely a bigger, a bigger plan that they got planned with this behind the scenes.
Right.
Love it.
Love it.
Anything in that direction is great for the people. I think, there's still such a mismatch in there's such a bias towards alcohol versus cannabis, right? People would be like, oh yeah, alcohol's fine, cannabis is bad, but look at the long-term research. So I think with the changes in regulation, it brings it to the news again. The more people get educated that, it's not the devil that it was once.
Talking about.
Okay, so I used to be a lobbyist.
Oh.
I used to want to legalize weed.
Okay.
I think, yay,
Yay.
cannabis should not be Schedule I.
Okay.
Correct.
Amen.
But should cannabis, a plant, a green thing that grows out of the earth, be on this drug schedule list?
Okay.
Or should Delta-9 THC or concentrated versions of cannabis only be the thing on that list?
Right.
Right?
Honestly, it was out of the blue. I was really excited to see it. I know that I've been hoping and low-key praying that they reschedule it for a long time. It allows a lot more research to be done with it. I'm not sure if many people realize
that's
that.
a big thing about it.
If it's Schedule I and you're a university that wants to be able to do a test or a study on cannabis, you're going to get it from the government, and they're giving you basically plants that are just put through a wood chipper and stuff.
It's a wild one. I mean, I spent 15 years extracting in Cali, so I've been dealing and lobbying against taxes and reform for the industry in general. So I kind of feel like it was the natural next step. I mean, what do we expect as legalization comes out, right? Corporatization happens, and there's still more work to be done, but
absolutely,
I think it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Honestly, does it even matter? I mean, does it do anything until it's actually legal?
That's the other vibe. Some people are saying it's not enough. Some people are saying it's great, but nothing really changes at all for normal people.
No, it's crazy because like everything they sell at a dispensary is THCA.
Right, that's what we're finding.
And I don't understand it because isn't everything then THCA because it doesn't be THCA until you hit a lighter, and then therefore everybody they put in prison shouldn't be in prison.
I'm not a fan.
You're not a fan.
They're handing it over to Big Pharma, in my opinion. So I apologize. I'm originally in that space. It's run by Wall Street.
It's money.
So they don't care how much anything costs. They're going to keep our prices through the roof.
Yeah.
So no different than corporate cannabis charging corporate criminal money for legal stuff. Your eighths at your corporate stores are what, $60? I got THCA and flower. It's legal, federally legal,
everywhere.
same stuff.
Everywhere.
It's everywhere, and you can buy it for like $35 to $40 an eighth, and their criminals are charging too much, so they're rescheduling it to be what, the same as ketamine?
Yeah.
Or like other drugs?
So still in the same spot.
So I get pulled over with a trunk full of ketamine, I'm still going to jail.
Yeah. Guys, there are opinions across the board. I love kind of the stretch here. But it is worth noting, even with all this going on, that nothing has happened yet. It's going to take months for this actually to get effectually put into place. There's going to be a conversation period. People are going to sue it left and right. So it's going to take some time to actually be implemented. And prohibitionists are already getting ready. There's already groups saying that Ann Milgram, the director of the DEA, hasn't signed off on it yet, saying there's political pressure involved in the decision and a lot of dissension in the ranks. So there's a lot of opposition that's lining up to kind of take on the question. But it's coming, it's on its way, it's around the corner, and I don't think there's anything that anyone can do to really stop it at this point. All right. Guys, thank you so much for checking out Cough Country News. Be sure you like, subscribe, follow, tell your friends about it. This is stuff people need to know about. We're here to keep you updated on what's going on in your world. So if you haven't hit that subscribe button, hit it. Go over to Facebook, go over to Instagram. Show us some love, baby. And we'll see you next time here on Cough Country News, where it's always no sticks, no seeds, just news.
No sticks, no seeds,